How did your parents handle it when your sibling died? My dad showed up 6 months after my brother's funeral and said the most insane thing I'd ever heard. You need to legally change your name to Robert Jr. because I still deserve to have a son with my name. I thought grief had broken his brain until Mom stood behind him nodding. Dad, you can't just give me my dead brother's name, I said. I'm Robert Sr. and need a son who's a Robert Jr. Either you go to the courthouse tomorrow or you're not my son at all. 3 days later, he hired an actual lawyer to send me a formal cease and desist letter demanding I stop using the name Josh because it was causing him emotional distress to not have a Robert Jr. in the family. He'd gathered 17 family members for an intervention where he presented a slideshow about the importance of legacy and generational names, complete with genealogy charts showing every Robert in our family tree for 6 generations. The lawyer he'd brought stood up halfway through and said he couldn't be part of this insanity, but my dad kept going. My uncle tried to explain that you can't force someone to take a dead person's name, but my dad started screaming that I was stealing his right to have a namesake. I ended up just walking out and now showing up to his scheduled court date, and given that I didn't hear another peep, I thought that was that. Until 4 months later, he showed up at my job with a court order he'd forged, claiming I'd legally changed my name to Robert Jr. He told my entire office to start calling me by my dead brother's name. He already had business cards with Robert Jr. on them and replaced my nameplate while I was at lunch, then sent emails from a spoofed address announcing my name change to all our clients. When security escorted him out, he stood in the parking lot with a megaphone announcing that Josh was dead and Robert Jr. had replaced him, holding a funeral wreath with my picture in it while wearing a suit covered in photos of my brother. When everybody in my life still referred to me as Josh, he completely lost his mind. He tried to actually become his own junior by legally changing his age to make himself young enough to be his own son. He went to Mexico and got black market hormone treatments to reverse his aging, injecting himself with experimental stem cells and testosterone blockers to make himself younger so he could legally argue he was Robert Jr. instead of Robert Sr. He had his teeth pulled out and replaced with younger implants, got hair transplants from a 20-year-old donor, and even tried to get a bone marrow transplant from a teenager to reset his DNA age. He was taking 40 pills a day and getting weekly blood transfusions from college kids he paid, and he actually filed paperwork with the court claiming he'd reversed his biological age by 30 years so he could be both Robert Sr. and Robert Jr. simultaneously. His body started rejecting everything at once, and he ended up in the ICU with multiple organ failure because he'd poisoned himself trying to become young enough to be his own son, and the doctors said he'd permanently destroyed his liver and kidneys trying to change his biological age markers. When I visited him in the hospital where he was waiting for the organ donor list, he grabbed my hand with his destroyed body shaking from all the damage he'd done. You forced me to try to become my own junior because you wouldn't take the name, he said while machines kept him alive. I'm dying because you couldn't just honor your brother and become Robert Jr. like I asked. You literally tried to age yourself backward, I said, but my mom slapped me and said her husband was dying because of my selfishness. If you had just changed your name, I wouldn't be on dialysis waiting for organs that might never come, he wheezed, and my entire family stood around his bed nodding like this made perfect sense. I kept my name Josh but lost everything else when my family started a campaign saying I'd murdered my father by refusing to take my dead brother's name. They posted photos of him hooked to machines next to photos of my brother's funeral, saying I'd killed them both by refusing one simple request. The GoFundMe for his medical bills explicitly said he was dying because his selfish son wouldn't honor family legacy, and it had raised $200,000 from strangers who called me a monster in the comments. My job let me go because clients were uncomfortable working with someone who'd driven their father to organ failure, and even my landlord suggested I move because neighbors were asking questions. My mom served me with power of attorney paperwork that would let her legally change my name while I slept, and she'd already forged my signature on half the forms. Full story on the channel below.